Hello, everyone, and welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today it is Friday, the 26th of April, 2024. My name is CareyHolzman, and thank you guys for tuning in. Well, it turns out on YouTube, you can accidentally delete all of your moderators with 2 clicks. Well, it was time to clean house anyway, so for those of you who are concerned, no worries. We are slowly but surely getting our moderators set back as we were before. However, nothing personal against anybody. It just sort of happened, and now we're gonna. It's a good thing anyway. Cleans house from a lot of folks that were moderators we haven't seen in a very long time. Make sure that the people that are active remain moderator status. And of course, if you're a paying member, you're automatically a moderator, of course. So I appreciate your patience through that. And if you feel like you've been left out, let us know. We'll make sure and correct it right away. Today, I'm doing a PC build for you guys. And before we get started, I just want to say a thank you again to our friends Frankie B, Oystein, and Peter Laycock, as well as somebody named Old Man Mage, who sent in an Amazon gift card, Tom Jackson, and there was a PayPal contribution earlier today from Anthony Franceschi. He says, a big thank you for all of your helpful videos. Well, right on. Thank you guys for supporting the channel so that we can continue to buy, well, essentially everything you see on the table, and then there's some stuff that can't fit on the table. Nothing was sent to us for free here in today's video. And in fact, in order to save some money, I've got a returned Amazon 14600K processor, an i5 14600K that comes from Amazon warehouse. It has a 30-day return, so I want to take advantage of it. Make sure that make sure it works within the 30 days I have to return it back to Amazon. If there's any problems with it, then it'll be under warranty from Intel. But it's just easier to work directly with Amazon. It's much faster. I've got an older Gen 3 Gamix S7 XPG NVMe drive that I've got a bunch of Gen 3 NVMe drives I need to work through. So we're going to throw that in here on an ASRock B760M Pro RSD4, which is a micro ATX board. I've got some ADATA RGB RAM. It's like 3000 speed. A lot of this stuff they don't make anymore, so links to the RAM and the SSD may point you to something different. That's just because of the age of the equipment. Trying to do a balanced build here with a Jonsbo mini ITX case, which looks really cool, using the Jonsbo cooler, which I couldn't find anywhere in the United States outside of eBay, and was shipped to me from South Korea. And it was amazingly fast shipping. I think it took only like a week. But I've never used their coolers, and I wanted it to look just like the picture for when they advertised the case. They had a couple of these fans at the bottom of the case that have a reverse spin to them. So they're not an ordinary fan in that regard. And yeah, I thought we'd build this today and just have a little fun with it and show you can still build a very, very quick, very fast system. And you don't have to use a Gen 4 or Gen 5 NVMe. Most people won't notice the difference in that. A lot of people are hung up on benchmarks. We've talked about this before. I feel bad for those people because they decide how happy or how sad they're going to be based on believing what a piece of software tells them. That has very little to do with reality. So at the end of the day, it really matters how the computer performs for you. And it doesn't necessarily mean the more money you spend, the better performance you get. A lot of times what it equates to is how you're using it more so than what it's capable of. Because you're using it doesn't mean you're using it to its full capabilities. And if you are, and you have a lot more money than most of us, you can certainly spend your way into little teeny tiny amounts of performance for big amounts of money. And that's your choice if you want to do that. But we're just trying to get the best bang for our buck here. It's what I do. There's too many enthusiasts out there with too much time and too much money, advising the rest of us without too much time or money, saying, hey, look at how great this is. Well, when you have an endless bank account and all day to do nothing else, absolutely. But then on the other hand, what are they actually going to use it for? Solitaire? I mean, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Not to rain on their parade. They enjoy that. That's their thing. But please understand the difference between watching enthusiast videos and watching practical how-to videos. When we do our videos, they have a purpose to be of value, reliable, and to last a very long time. Enthusiast videos tend to lose interest or replace or upgrade the machine in some way, shape, or form every year or two. So unless you have that kind of budget and time where you always like to keep your hands inside the computer and you can't ever be happy with what you have, those other channels are really for that mindset. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm just helping to define how we differentiate ourselves here in the real world for what real customers hire me for in the business. These folks that make the majority of tech videos, again, nothing personal. It's just not the reality that keeps me in business. I didn't even know those people existed outside of, it's really strange because in real life, I don't know anybody like that. I've never met a person in my life who had that kind of money and that kind of time in person. But yet the few that there are, there's a disproportionate amount of them creating content, which, it makes sense. They're passionate, right? And they all have that in common. The issue that I foresee there is that the common user will look at that stuff and not identify that that's really just for enthusiasts. That's not for them. They don't need to spend all that money, and they're likely not going to see the difference. These are people, they're just hung up on benchmarks constantly and don't typically use their computer for very much to even justify needing it. They just enjoy it. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Just I want you to be able to identify what you're watching. That's all. And then how it applies to you is for you to decide, not me. But there is a big difference between what I do and what the vast majority do. Also, with your support, we're able to buy our own parts so we can build whatever we want, whenever we want, how we want, which is much more realistic to the real world than companies sending you parts for free. Companies are not charities, generally speaking. They're in business to make money. If they're sending a part for free, that's a marketing or an advertising campaign. And it's hard to do a review with a free product in an unbiased way, because if the product I receive is free and I don't like it, it's not that big of a deal. But if the product I paid for I don't like and I'm stuck with it, I can't return it, then I'm pissed off. So it definitely has an impact on the quality of the review or the unbiased nature of the review if the company's involved in any way. It's best to do this anonymously. Jonsbo has no idea that we're doing this. They don't even know who I am, quite frankly. And I just built it because I wanted to. Of all the cases I had to pick from, I wanted that one. Of all the coolers, I wanted theirs. I wanted something different, and I've never worked with a Jonsbo cooler. The fact I couldn't find one in the United States made me want it that much more. And I went on a search and found it on eBay direct from Jonsbo out of South Korea. Package arrived from South Korea. DHL or FedEx, I can't remember. I've never had a package arrive from South Korea in my life, so I was the novelty of that was kind of fun, seeing the weird address label and stuff on it. And hopefully it'll be as good as previous experiences with their cases. And then, of course, their fans as well. We'll just kind of measure them and see how they measure up compared to, the more popular things you see content creators doing. So we're trying to carve our own niche here in doing what is practical and also what is different, but also it's got to have value. It can't just be different. It's got to have a reason for being different, whether that's price, attainability, aesthetic, it just, instead of doing the same old thing over and over again or doing what everybody else is doing, nobody else is going to do a system like this because it's all random parts that I either saw on sale or I had on hand. And this is quite often the way people do it. It's often not just an endless budget of getting whatever you want. So, okay, I hope these videos are more useful to you as a regular viewer. Thank you to our friends over at Acronis. Acronis is giving you guys a 30% discount off any new Acronis subscription all year throughout 2024. And the link for that is in the video notes below the video. We will have them on again as we explore more about what Acronis could do and how to use it. It's a very easy piece of software to use. I hope you're backing up your machine, or I hope you don't mind if you lose everything, if you're not. Either way, it's on you. Nobody else can help you with it except for very, very expensive data recovery services who might or might not be able to get your data back for a couple $1,000s in a couple of weeks' time. It's your choice what you want to do. So our thanks to Acronis for offering that, also with a free trial, so you can make a backup completely for free with the free trial, and even if you decide not to buy the software, you can always restore that backup in the future for free. The Acronis always allows free restorations, regardless if you have an active subscription or not. And our friends at RoboForm. That's the password manager that I use that logs me into websites without me having to remember my name or password. It does it all for me. It creates the passwords that are ultra secure, really long gibberish passwords that I could never remember. If I wrote them down, I wouldn't even read back my writing properly. So RoboForm is a lifesaver and a time saver, very inexpensive, 30% off on top of that for any new users on a year-long subscription, and you can install it on any devices you have. There's no limit to the number of devices you could install it on for your one license. So if you want it on your phone, your tablet, your laptop, your work PC, your home PC, yeah, knock yourself out. And we've got interviews from both Acronis and RoboForm here on the channel. If you're new here, be sure and go back and look at those. And they go over the product's basic functionality and basic usage and how to get started. Also with a free trial. And finally, our friends at VIP CDK deals with discounts on Windows 10, Windows 11, and Microsoft Office products, all 100% legal, legitimate, real, and all backed up and guaranteed. So, all right, with that, let's see what we got going on. Take a look. Bob Moose says, random old eBay things is my way of building. Usually things work, just not spectacularly. Well, again, it kind of depends. It kind of depends on what you're buying on eBay, right? So there are certain things I will avoid on eBay. I try to avoid motherboards from eBay. RAM typically has a lifetime warranty. CPUs usually have a lifetime warranty. There is a lot of scam out there, though, with CPUs where they'll take the print off of it and they'll modify it to be something it isn't. So if you don't recognize really the shape and the design of the chip, you can get taken to the cleaners, and eBay's not good when it comes to refunds or backing up the buyers. You'll say, hey, I ordered a 14600K and they sent me a Core i3 3200. You know, it's completely the wrong chip, and they've disguised it. And they'll say, well, it shows you got a, tracking information was delivered, so you were sent something. So, take it up with the USPS for postal fraud. We don't get involved in that. And then, you can also contact, if you use PayPal or your credit card, you could try that. In most cases, they're going to say, look, you bought a product. We see a tracking number. The tracking number shows it was delivered. So looks like you're the scammer. So you have an uphill battle. When I buy new product from Amazon, one of the reasons I do it is that generous return policy, that 30 days to send things back. And nothing we have here came used from eBay. If I buy anything used, well, at least on today's build, it came from Amazon, right? The CPU is a returned product. Motherboard is new. The RAM is something I had in a previous build that I took out, so it's my used RAM. I bought it new. I'm the original owner. I have a brand new in a box A-data drive I've never used. And the brand new cooler that came from eBay came straight from the manufacturer in South Korea. So I'm pretty confident everything's going to work like it should. But I definitely want to test the CPU out as soon as possible. So if I have to return it for any reason, Amazon makes that easy in the first 30 days. After 30 days, I got to deal with Intel if I have a problem. So it's best, if you're going to order this stuff, make sure you test it right away. And most of the time, it's good. It's maybe 10, 15% of the time. 10% stuff that I buy used has to go back. Ben Laird with a £2 contribution says hello from Scotland. Hey, Ben, welcome in, my friend. And welcome Alpha Video and Computer Services as a new supporter. Right on. Thanks for for becoming a supporter here so we can remain independent and honest. Okay. Just looking and saying hello in the chat. Hello to Luke Greeny. Hello to Marco Maelstrom. Welcome in, guys. All right. Now the air conditioner is kicking on and off. I'm not sure if you guys are going to hear that, but that's already starting here. We're already into our summer weather. We're getting close to 100-degree days now. Today actually is a little cooler. Should only be in the 80s today, but it's hot enough that the AC is kicking on. So sometimes it gets hotter in the house than it does outside. Very strange. All right. Welcome in, everyone. As a reminder, some folks, there's Alan Lindas. Hey, Alan, thank you for your $7.77 contribution. He goes, hey, Carey, I'm on time today and my usual fee. Thank you, as always. There's a setting in YouTube that allows me to essentially clear out all of the moderators. Turns out that setting works. So if you've lost your moderator status, it's coming back. Don't worry about it. Mara's in there and she's turning you back blue as you were before. Obviously, if you're a paying member, you're automatically blue. And it was nothing that was done to any specific people. It was done to all people. And it kind of turned into a blessing in disguise anyway, because we had a lot. We had over 2,200 moderators, and we have less than 2,200 regular viewers. So the only way to really clear out the old from the new, rather than picking through it, simply to wipe it and start over again. So those of you who are here, those of you who are familiar, those of you who were blue before, will be blue again. Nothing to worry about. If you find that we've missed you, it's likely because we didn't see you in the chat room, and you'll have to leave a comment. We need something to click on which has your name on it in order to turn you blue. So if you're watching this video after it airs, just leave a comment and say, hey, you didn't turn me blue. And we can put that right back, no problem. Apologize for any inconvenience, but it's a nice way to drain the swamp. That's the right word. All right, so let's see if we can get on to today's build. So again, I've got this returned Core i5 14600K. I've got this brand new 2 terabyte Gen 3. Now this motherboard is only supporting Gen 4 anyway, so I didn't have any Gen 4 drives laying around. Nothing. I think the Gen 4 drives I have are all 4 terabyte, and I didn't want to. I want this build to be something that you could build at home, and you know, a 4 terabyte Gen 4 drive is going to set you back a few $100s. And for a few $100s, you can buy the chip and the motherboard, you know, for the price of one part. And then again, that part is really going to make a big difference in your benchmarks. But in your everyday normal usage, very few people who watch this video, despite what they tell themselves, despite how much they think they need it, most of them, you could completely change the part where they were asleep. And when they woke up in the morning, they wouldn't notice any difference with their computer. However, to each their own. There's a placebo effect. There's this emotional effect that, hey, I just bought something more expensive and it's faster, so therefore my computer is faster. And far be it for me to take that delusion away from them. If they wish to be delusional, then that's how they choose to do it. That's fine. Customers generally don't contact me with delusion. They contact me because they have a specific need they need resolved, and that's how I make a living. So for me, because I don't make a living off delusion, I make light of it because I don't live in whatever that world is. But clearly, there's a lot of people out there that buy unnecessary product that's over the top fast because they believe they need it, when in fact they don't need it at all. And as I mentioned, you could switch the parts out while they were sleeping. They wouldn't even know when they woke up and turned it on and started using it, it was any different. In most cases, they'd never know until they run benchmarks. They let the benchmarks decide if they're happy or not, and they believe the benchmarks, which I think is the weirdest thing. Hey, there's Gregory Howard with a $20 super chat. He says hello. Welcome in, Gregory. Thank you for your continued support of the channel. And Paul1961 renews his membership. Thank you, Paul. All right, so let's take a look. Let's see what we got going on in here. Everything else should be brand new. The board should be brand new. This is my first time unboxing it. Let's see. We've got SATA cables. We have an M.2 screw and standoff. We've got owner's manual. And then 2 more M.2 screws. Probably ones for like a Wi-Fi, M.2 Wi-Fi. And then in the box itself, so we can take that out. Put that over there. Ow. Ow. Just poked me. Okay, so there's our board. Now, putting this all together usually just takes a few moments. It's usually pretty quick. And here we've got our the M.2 Armor motherboard. And so we'll lift off the heatsink and put the M.2 drive in there. We'll put our CPU in. We'll slap our RAM in. And we should be ready to fire this bad boy up. Now, I know there was a recent BIOS update to this about 3 days ago. And I've already went ahead and downloaded it and put it on this blue flash drive. So we'll add that when the time comes when we do our post. And then after we do that, we can install Windows 11. Now I'm thinking I can hook up this TG240 all-in-one cooler just outside of the case. I am concerned if I get the case out here that it's going to really block everything you can see. So let's see what we can do here to expedite this process. Oops. Probably need to hold on to that screwdriver. I was hoping that those screws would remain captive, but they don't. I was kind of hoping to trap them. All right, so it appears the M.2 drive is going to be held in place by the heatsink. Yeah, I've had this drive for some time, and this box has never been opened. I bet you this box has been sitting on the shelf 2 years. Definitely well past my return period, but the warranty on these, I think, is 5 years. So we're still well within warranty if there's any problems. And very rarely do I ever see a bad M.2 drive, so I'm not worried. I'm sure it's fine. Harry Thor with $10 Canadian says, happy to move over to Lappy in order to see how to contribute. Plus, the screen is bigger than his phone. Well, right on. Well, thank you for that. Thank you, Harry Thor. Oh, you know what? This has a little heat sink on it. And when you're using an M.2 slot that has a heat sink that the motherboard manufacturer includes, I recommend you either remove the heatsink from the drive, move the drive into a different M.2 slot if your motherboard has more than one. And this one looks like it's only got one. I don't know why they gave us 3 M.2 screws. I see a place for one here, one here. So what's the third one for? I don't know. I'm actually quite surprised that usually there's a minimum of 2 M.2 drives. Oh, there is one. It's down here on the bottom. So we've got our M.2 here under the heatsink. And then we've got our M.2 way over here. There it is. And then this is for, this one right here is for your M.2 Wi-Fi. If you wanted to add a laptop style Wi-Fi card, you could totally do that. So I guess what I want to do is I'm going to switch this out for something else that doesn't have a heatsink on it, because I hate to waste a good heatsink. It's a terrible thing to waste. So I'm going to step back here over to my inventory shelf. And let's see, I've got Gen 5, Gen 4, which is 4 terabytes. It's too big. I've got a 980 Pro that has a heatsink on it. What do I want to do? Let's see. Yeah, those are all 4 terabyte drives. I've got still some of the Intel budget drives, but I really wanted to go a little bit nicer than that. Maybe a high-end Gen 3. How about a Samsung 970 Evo Pro Plus? I used a ton of these, and when they went on sale, I bought a ton more because I knew they were a good value. So the 2 terabyte 970 Evo Plus, for a while, these things were so inexpensive. I think I bought about a dozen of them, and I think I've only used 2. So I still have a lot of these left over. And as I mentioned, to an ordinary user starting your computer, launching your applications, you're not going to see any speed difference between Gen 3 and Gen 4. You'd have to be moving a lot of files and moving them a lot in order to really benefit from the speed performance differences. But to each their own, and how we choose to invest our money and what brings us joy. Don't let me get in your way of your joy. I'm just trying to remain practical, reasonable, and I'd rather take the money I'm not spending so I can buy other stuff rather than just blow everything I've got and then some on one thing. So it's kind of the logic I'm using here. I'd rather have 3 computers that were good than one over-the-top ridiculous computer. That's my personal preference. All right, let's take a look here. So this is our Samsung 970 Evo Plus. We'll pop that in there. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen, is that's going to sit down. Interesting. What holds that down? Let's see, we can remove the tape. There we go. I mean, I'm assuming I don't have to put anything on there. It looks like it's going to hold it down for us. I'm not a big fan of when the motherboard manufacturers don't give us a separate screw to secure the M.2, and that the screw is shared by the heatsink, because with the thermal tape on the bottom of the heatsink, it tends to stick to the M.2 drive. So when you need to remove the M.2 for any reason at all, you've got to be careful how you take off your heatsink, or you can potentially damage your M.2 drive. Essentially, you need to treat the whole heatsink like it's an M.2 drive and slide it out instead of lift it straight up when you take it off, or you could damage the drive because it's going to be stuck to it. They're all going to be one piece now. Whereas if it had a screw that secured the M.2 drive down, you could pull the heatsink off any way you wanted to. But 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I suppose. Just be aware of it. Now, when it comes to the CPU, I'm hoping this is not one that was somehow damaged. If it is, again, Amazon will take it back for any reason whatsoever within 30 days. So when I buy used product from Amazon, I make sure it's coming from Amazon warehouse and not from a third-party seller. David Graham with a $5 super chat said, watching you spend the money and build stuff makes me happy and satisfied. My addiction. You're my therapy. Right on. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying the content. We're glad to have you here. Arnold wants to know if I'll be adjusting the BIOS settings on this build for stability. We may not need to because of the cooler, but we'll have to determine that when we get to it. If I had built a number of these in the past, I could tell you right now. But I don't think I've ever used a 14600K ever in my life. I could be wrong, but I think this is the very first time. So I don't know how it's going to perform. I also don't know that combination of putting it on a B760 board instead of a 790, given it's a K processor, may be a light load on this CPU because it was designed out of the box to run hotter. So we'll just see what happens, but potentially, yes, I might have to go in there and change it. Now, this CPU, let me tell you something about the CPU. Let me bring it up to the camera. Whenever you get returned product, you can usually tell if it was installed. Nobody ever cleans the thermal compound off 100%. And if you look, there is not, this camera will focus, there is not a drip or a remnant of any thermal material left. That means to me, either they have one of the best used parts cleaners in the industry, or this was never even used. Because even if it was built in a computer that, say for example, a system builder had a system ready to go and a customer said, I want that system, but with this different CPU, they just swap the CPU out. But it would already have thermal compound on it, even if it was never sold. So this one looks like it was never even so much as put into a socket. This looks brand new to me. So let's go ahead and open up the socket here. And we'll drop that in. Now, these lids don't pop off on their own like they used to, so we got to remove the lid. And we need to save that, of course. And then we'll just close her right back up. Yeah, that looks as new can be. Okay, so we'll take all of that. That can go down there. The SATA cables, we're not going to use these during this build. And then the M.2 stuff, I'm going to say, let's go ahead and put the M.2 screws into the board so we don't lose them. A couple of years from now, we might want to add another M.2. And then we've got to find where the screws went. I really feel like manufacturers should just go ahead and put the screws in there for us and not waste all the plastic that's going to go into a landfill and take 1,000 years to biodegrade. So that's just my personal opinion. This all seems very wasteful to me and unnecessary and troubling to most computer owners who will not need this for years after they build and will likely not be able to remember where they put these extra parts. It happens to me in my line of work all the time. And finding these little M.2 screws can be a bear because they're not all the same size. Okay, so those two are done. And that still leaves me with a standoff and a screw, which I don't know why I have two extras, but we'll put them in the box. And we'll put our documentation back in the box. Craig Casabona with a $20 super chat. Right on. Thank you, Craig. All right, let's see. What should I do next? We could pop the RAM in, but it may get in the way of the cooler install. I'm thinking we put the cooler in. So the problem with putting the cooler in, because it's a liquid cooler, is I have to have the radiator hanging out. And that's fine. We can run it like that all day. But then when it comes to putting the motherboard and the cooler into the case, I may have to disconnect the water pump from the motherboard to get it to mount. So the more I think about this, the more I think I really need to go get the case. And if we're going to do that, I might as well just go ahead and pop the RAM in there now. Now on this motherboard, only one side of the RAM retention bracket's open, and that's because if you put a video card in here, this side would hit the back of the video card. So this side, on some motherboards, that side does not open, and that's normal. Now, normally, we're also paying attention to which sockets we're using, but because we have 4 sockets and 4 RAM sticks, it doesn't matter. We're just gonna put them all in and use them all. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter which one goes in which socket. We're just gonna fill up all 4 sockets with the 4 RAM modules. And you'll notice all the 4 RAM modules are the same make and model to ensure that the system will be reliable. And that's going to have RGB on it there. All right, let me think about how I want to move forward from here. Let's put this box over here. Let's move this. Let's see, what am I going to need? I'm going to need Lazy Susan to spin the case around so you guys can see. So let's grab that. Put that up here. All right, all right. Each one of these builds is different, and I've never worked with that cooler or this case before. So let me go grab the case, and I have to take it out of the box, and I'll just do that back here off camera, but I'll keep talking to you even though you can't see me. Somewhere back here I have, here it is. Now the links for everything we're using are in the video notes, including for this case, if you want to jump ahead. The case is called a TK-1. It's a Jonsbo design. And let's see if I can get this box open. I've had this here a little while. This was originally going to be an AMD 8000 build, but I was so upset with the AMD 8000's lack of performance and high heat. I will not be using any AMD 8000 series chips ever. I think they're just one of the worst new chips to come out. The whole 8000 series doesn't even support PCIe Gen 5. They run at 95 degrees Celsius. Nothing you can do about it, and not that I'm aware of. And I think they cost too much money for what you get when you can buy other AMD chips or other Intel chips that are, to me, much more value for the dollar. Now, if I was building a console like an Xbox or something, well, then I think that the AMD 8000 would be ideal because of its integrated graphics performance. But if you add a discrete graphics card, it'll only run at 8x. The thing is just basically sacrificing all of the performance to its integrated graphics. So if you have no intention on using the integrated graphics and you want to go with a discrete card, stay away, I'm telling you, stay away from the AMD. Any AMD chip that starts with the number 8. Okay, let me get this thing out of the box here. Oh, this is packed weird. The glass cover is not attached. All right, let's see what it looks like. This looks a little bit like the other, was it Sagotep that we did? Interesting. And then the glass is packed separately instead of being pre-installed. And of course, the glass will go on as such. And of course, that's why we're using a micro ATX board today. Then our power button and USB ports are right there up front. And then directly in the back, you'll see we've got our space for power supply and the motherboard I/O shield back there. So I thought this was a very attractive case. And when I looked at the picture, the marketing picture online at Amazon, I really liked the way that they photographed it and realized that's their cooler and their fans. So I thought I'd do my best to try and replicate that today. So I'm inspired by the marketing photos, which of course will dress the machine up to make it look as beautiful as possible. All right, so we've got a box here, which I guess is our accessories for the TK-1 case. That's all that's in there. So we've got some zip ties, some screws to tie down the board, install any drives we want to put on. It looks like back here, there's these vents, and I think this whole piece comes off. This is like a dual chambered case where effectively your power supply and your liquid cooler can be in the back here. I have not done any research on this case. I just like the way it looked and I like the price. And I've worked with some other Jonsbo cases before and I thought, well, let's give it a shot. So I don't have any predefined ideas of how this goes together or how it all works. However, it looks pretty obvious to me. But I'm warning you, I could be completely wrong. But that's part of the fun of it. Swing open. Is this on a hinge? No. Yeah, so there's that piece there. And that gives us access to a 3.5-inch drive bay right here. Our power supply will go in there over here. Yeah. Fascinating. It's a very interesting case design. Now, they're using a couple of different styles of screws on this case, so I want to make sure that these screws stay with this panel. Because where the power supply goes in, there are some rounded screws. They're very different in length, size, in shape. And if you mix these up, you're going to have a hard time putting things back together, and you could strip the screw threads out of it. So I'm just going to take a moment to set this aside with the screws. Keep those together. It's nice when a case manufacturer uses the same screw throughout. When they do stuff like this, you have different screws to mount the hard drive, different screws to mount a 2.5-inch. That's just the way the industry is. Then you also have different screws for the power supply, and then you'll have different screws for the motherboard. So I also don't like they're using just the standard brass motherboard standoffs versus the aluminum or silver ones, but no one's going to see it once the board is on it anyway. So because we're going to add the power supply to the other side, nothing is stopping us right now from putting the motherboard in. I'm reading a note on top. It says, press, then push backward to take out top panel. Press and then push backward. Oh, would you look at that? Well, it looks like there's room way up on top here for our radiator to go up there if we want it to. But then I wonder what this back area is for. If that's not for the radiator, then for what? And then they've got a bunch of rubber grommets that hold this lid on, and I really like the quality of that design. That's going to really secure on there with, you know, there's 8 different screws. When you slide that on, it's being held down at 8 different points. That's probably a bit overkill for this, but I'm happy to see it. So yeah, our cooler could go here, or I think our cooler can go in the back. Now, the problem with running your cooler in the back is you've got all of your cabling. So what I found on the other build, I think that was the Sago tip, what we called the coffee machine. That one, I was concerned about the cables hitting the fans on the back of the radiator when they're all back here. So putting the radiator up top is probably a much safer bet, and I think it's going to look better that way, because we'll have 2 RGB fans here from the top, and then 2 also at the bottom that should all match because they're all made from Jonsbo. But the Jonsbo case and the Segatep case, they look very similar. A little different, and I'd say the Jonsbo case looks a lot easier to access, but both very attractive cases. Peter VZ contributes €1. Thank you, Peter. And let's see what else we got going on. What will be the power supply? I don't know yet, Old Man 55. I haven't made up my mind. So for testing and everything else, well, I guess we're going to build it. We're not really going to test it. Doing something a little different today. I'll have to look on the shelf and see what I have that I think will be a good fit. We'll get there probably in the next half hour or an hour. We'll figure that out. These videos are, they're live and unscripted, and I have not yet decided on that part of it yet. I may just slap a power supply on without installing it, just to make sure everything's working. Or I might not. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Gary Tatum renews his membership, now a member for 23 months. Dustin Fuller contributed $5. What happened, he says, I was changed from a blue wrench to green. You'll be blue again. It's just all of the moderators got wiped out. And I don't have DVR mode turned on during today's video to avoid confusion, but people joining us late will have missed the beginning where I explained this already. You will all get your blue status back. We had a lot of inactive blue members. Probably 50 to 60% of our mods were just no longer regularly visiting us. So if you're a regular visitor here, or a contributor, or both, or you had blue status before, you'll have it again. You just need to mention it to us. And once we see you in the chat, well, we're keeping Mara very busy today as she's turning folks blue for me so I can focus on doing the video today. But thank you for your contribution. Not to worry, everything's good. Everything's good, everything's okay. Shamim Kajvira has now renewed membership on a month number 11. It says, hey, Carey, it's almost 1 year as a member of this great computer education channel. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. And thank you for renewing your membership and supporting the channel. It's because of folks like you that we can do videos like these. Just want to go back just to make sure I'm caught up. So yeah, Craig Casabona with his $20 super chat. Yeah, I think I'm caught up. I hope I haven't missed anybody. Okay, so I think what I want to do first is put the motherboard in, as I previously mentioned. Now, there are standoffs already pre-mounted in here, but I don't know that they're in the right locations. So what I'm going to do is just what I call a dry fit. That's where we just set the case on its side like this. Now, normally you have a big heatsink or something to grab the motherboard by. In this case, our I/O shield is already built onto the board, so that saves us a step. And I will hold everything either by a heatsink or by edges, so that way I don't have to worry about any anti-static discharge affecting anything. If there is an anti-static discharge, we can discharge static into the heatsink or into the edges of the board all day. What we don't want to do is we don't want to grab any of the components from top or bottom and then possibly, have an ESD event, an electrostatic discharge event. Okay, so let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3 mounting points there. 2 mounting points. Interesting. So we're missing a standoff for the middle. and then 2 on top. So all of the pre-installed standoffs are in the correct location. However, there is one missing. Now, we could install it with the one missing, but usually you get some spares in the bag. And if you've got it, you know, smoke them if you got them, kind of a thing. Might as well use it. It's not doing you any good sitting in the bag. Interestingly, they're still including the little red washers that were used between the screws and the motherboards. I don't recommend using these because they block your ability to ground the board. So I don't know why they're still including that. That's a thing of the 90s. That should have been gone a long time ago. We've got some bigger screws here. These bigger thumb screws with washers. These look like they might be for maybe the glass. We've got a bunch of fan screws. We've got some other little screws here labeled, the bag's labeled SSD. This bag is labeled HDD, so your solid state drives and your hard drive screws. It's nice that they label the bags. We've got a couple of free zip ties for cable management later. And then they give us one spare standoff with a little socket that converts to a Phillips screwdriver. I don't use those little sockets. I have a proper 5mm socket, which I think works way better. But if you don't, well, that little socket there lets you use a Phillips screwdriver to turn these little 5mm these standoffs down onto the board. Don't over tighten it though, because if you strip out the back of the motherboard tray, there's no repairing that. But we could always leave it empty. We don't have to put the standoff in there. And we could use a plastic standoff just to keep the board from sagging if you're worried about that. But I have a dedicated tool with a 5mm socket. Just use that. Okay. I probably should go around to the other standoffs and make sure they're tight, but I'm going to assume, I shouldn't, but I'm going to assume they're all tight. And now when I set the board back in here, everything should align. All the motherboard mounting holes should align with all of the standoffs. Don't. That's because the standoff I just put in needs to go a little over, a little more to my left, your right, and it's the first time I think I've seen a case that supports this. Interesting. So we'll go ahead and move that over. Once again, don't have to use it, but if we've got it, the case supports it, the motherboard wants it, let's give it what it wants. Now when I set this in theory, should line up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's all of them. So we can go ahead and just lock that in right now. Now, if I know that these are hard drive screws and these are SSD screws, then I won't need either of those ever on this build that we're doing today. So we'll put those in a box, out of sight, out of mind. I think this is for the glass to go onto it to secure. So put that in there because it'll only be in the way otherwise. This larger bag, and whatever this label is, it says this was made in July of 2023. That can go in that pile on the floor. And then, of course, the nylon zip ties can go in there. So that must mean this last bag must be for the motherboard. This bag has the little socket on it for the motherboard standoff to convert that to a, so you can use a Phillips screwdriver to tighten and remove it. And I think I will go ahead and put all these fan screws in this little bag with that socket. What is a standoff? Somebody must be new here. So the standoff is what keeps the bottom of the motherboard from hitting the metal of the case and short-circuiting everything, causing the smoke to come out. Computers run on the smoke, and if you let the smoke out, they don't work anymore. No, seriously, the standoffs are a way of keeping the back of the board from touching the metal of the case. See how the motherboard's lifted up a little bit? It stands the board off away from the back of the case. Hence, it's called a standoff. All right, let's take a look and see if we can get these. Let's see, we need 8 of these screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we still have 5 left over. Why? They don't give us that many standoffs. What are these 5 left over for? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These can go back in the bag. Now these little red washers that they've given me a bunch of from 1997, this is trash. I highly recommend you do not use these. These are actually preventing the board from grounding properly. And there's times where I've seen people plug in flash drives and their whole system reboots, and they don't understand that when they got up and walked around, they picked up a static charge from the carpet or from the couch or chair they were sitting on. And then they grab their flash drive and they go to plug it into their USB port, and the whole system reboots because of the static discharge that just happened. So one way that can help prevent that, besides using some fabric softener or anti-static spray on your furniture and in your carpet, would also be to make sure the motherboard is well grounded. These don't do that. These keep it isolated away from ground, which, again, I cannot condone or endorse. But that's the way we used to do it back in the day. So let me get these screws started here. We'll make sure we have everything lined up before we tighten anything down. And that way, if things don't align, it'll be no big deal to sort of wiggle the board a little bit until things are aligned. Once all the screws are started, then at that point, we can go ahead and tighten them down. Now, my electric driver, I wouldn't normally recommend people use an electric driver. But if you use one a lot and you're familiar with how it feels and how it works, well, I'll let that be your judgment call. Using an electric driver to remove screws is certainly no big deal. But putting them in, it can be easily stripped out. This electric driver has a clutch on it, and it will auto turn off once my clutch setting of torque is set. So I've got this set on one of the lowest torque settings possible. It's on the number 3. And so once we start all of these screws, once we know everything is aligned, then I can go ahead and let the driver tighten down to its stopping point. And you'll hear the driver shuts itself off when it hits its predefined torque setting. Now, it's not important or critical in any way that all the screws be torqued to the same torque setting. It's just, as a builder, I like to build everything the same. I'm not just building one. I build quite a few every year, and I sell them, and I have to support them. And I want to make sure that if a customer calls me with a question, instead of having to remember how I did each one, I do them all the same. So I know that there won't be an issue with a screw coming loose and shipping, things like that, that is unique to my line of work that, you know, folks at home watching at home don't need to worry about stuff like that. Unless you're moving it around a lot. Okay, so obviously there's the bottom of the case with the feet. We can bring this up and you can see how that motherboard fits right in there like a glove. Yeah, this is already coming together really nice. Romian with a 2-pound contribution. Right on. Thank you for your support. Easy Utter wants to know if any PC builder here is seeing people asking for internal CD or DVD drives. I recommend external CD, DVD drives, or Blu-ray drives. You can pick them up for about the same price. So if I have a customer and they need 6 or 8 new computers, if we're adding DVD drives to all 6 or 8 computers, we're easily adding $400 to the cost of the build. So to save money, and because of the infrequency in which, if they are using CDs or DVDs, they're typically not using them daily, I recommend we buy 2 external ones from Amazon. That's about $60. And that way, 2 people can use it at the same time, or if one breaks or one gets lost, you have another one. And so that's what we've been doing from now on. So we go full USB external on the drives. They're very, very cost effective, and you can move it around as you need it. I'm not aware of anybody who's using DVDs on a regular basis that they would want it internal. Finding a case that will support an internal DVD drive could be difficult. Samuel Kowalski with a $2 super chat says, fantastic video and channel, Carey. Right on. Thank you, Samuel. Decrypted Bear says, Carey, built my first PC after watching you. Thanks for doing this. Right on. That's cool. I love to hear that. Netfreak says he rips CDs from time to time. Yeah, that's why I say you can just get an external USB CD DVD drive. And whenever you want to do that, you're not going to notice any speed difference. Those things never transfer data fast to begin with. So if anything, it might even work faster externally. USB port might be faster, although I suspect it's in the unit itself. You know, it's probably sending the data out at full speed, regardless if it's internal or external. It shouldn't make any performance difference whatsoever. It's a very slow way to, DVDs and CDs are very slow. You know, get yourself a flash drive and move into 2005, you know, with the rest of us, or 20 years later in 2024. But yeah, DVDs are very, very slow, very small in capacity, kind of expensive. They also don't have the longevity and robust reliability of a flash drive. But to each their own. And again, if you're in a field, a medical field or a legal field where they're still using that as a means to transfer important, critical, private data that's still in use today as a means to do that securely. And usually it's just getting from party A to party B. Once the other party has the data, they just copy it off the DVD. The DVD will go into a filing cabinet somewhere as evidence or records. But the rest of the files are extracted onto the private network of the company so that the employees have access to them. Usually it's more than one employee working on any particular case in an office, and all employees at some point may need access to the data. It's not like they're going to walk around with the DVD. That's very convenient. So that's usually the process, is that moving things to DVD or CD is usually quite temporary and done for secure purposes in those industries. So, all right, with the board installed, I suppose I can work on this cooler. Now, let me move this lid. We'll put it aside. And we can add these fans later. These fans are going to go down onto the bottom down here. So we can add these later. These will have no effect on performance. They're just there for looks. Romian with the 2-pound contribution said it looks like a very good rig. I like it. It's definitely something different. And whether or not it's good, well, that's yet to be determined. But I've been very happy with the Jonsbo build quality and pricing. I'm hoping their cooler lives up to the same level. That's why I only bought one. But I know where to get more if I want to get more. James Steinbreaker says, I use everything I learned from you in our business. Yeah, and you're not going to hear much good business advice coming from the enthusiast channels, right? Because they're just doing it for fun. And many of them have never worked in IT in their life. They just enjoy computers. So I hope to offer something a bit different here on my channel in that regard. All right, so we've got some instructions here. And then in the box, it's packaged pretty much the way all liquid coolers are packaged. We've got the radiator, the fans, and the block all right in here. So, oh, this isn't the fans. This is the mounting hardware. It looks like the fans are already attached to the radiator. That's a new one. That saves me a little work. I'm okay with that. Okay, that's all that's in the box. Look at that. Fans are already attached for us. We've got our water block here with a screen on it. I don't know if it's just a logo on here. I imagine for the price, it's probably just a lit up logo, but it does have a piece of plastic which covers the screen to prevent it from scratching and shipping, transportation. I really like that those fans are already attached. Man, that's... Why can't they all do that? Holy cow. That's so much better. Why didn't I think of that? All right, now this supports Intel and AMD sockets. We're running an Intel socket 1700 on this 14th gen. So we will open this up. And anything that's an AMD installation part, we can put back in the box in case we want to move this cooler to another build or change the board to an AMD. If you're never going to do that, you can just throw the AMD parts out. Or the reverse, if you're building an AMD, you can put away all the Intel parts in case you decide to move the cooler to an Intel build or change the build, or just throw the Intel parts out if you intend to keep it that way forever. Let's see what we've got here. We've got some thermal grease, it says, with a little spreader tool. We've got a half a bracket, another half a bracket. A piece of that fell off, apparently. We've got thumb screws, smaller screws, big thumb screws. Oh, I'm definitely going to have to read the directions on this one. A couple of standoffs here. Okay, so there's a piece missing. I'll bring this up to the camera and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I like that they've more or less done a lot of things for us here. Right? These screws, instead of being in a bag, they're already attached onto the bracket. But one is missing. And they're pretty unique looking. And I like that they're pre-attached, and I think this is the one we need on Intel. If it was the AMD one, I wouldn't care, but I do have a little anxiety now. Where is that missing piece? Yeah, that is the Intel backplate. We do need that. And without that piece, we're not going to get much further today because we won't be able to secure the heatsink to the top of the CPU. And we have the plastic washer, but I don't know where the little screw is. And it's such a unique and silver screw, it should be easily seen. Everything was in this one bag, which was in the box. Let me look in the box just to see what I do with it. I threw it, didn't I? Oh, it's down here. Nothing in the box. I mean, I would have heard it. Nothing in the bag, nothing in that bag. Yeah, I didn't throw anything down that had anything in it. Well, that's a real bummer. I mean, that's a showstopper in every sense of the word, that we're missing that. Very strange. So if anything, it should have been trapped in this bag here, what everything was in, and it's just not in there. And it would have spilled out onto the, oh, wait, here it is. Here it is. Of course, this guy is a little runner we got here. Trying to hide, he got out, and then he went hiding after that. So we'll just go ahead and put that back on. I don't think this has a particular required direction that it goes in. Okay, we can continue. Scare over. All right, now the bag does say these are called mount nuts. This bag says Intel screws. This bag says case and fan screws. Okay. This bag says Intel socket 2011. So we're not using an Intel socket 2011. And this bag says AMD, so we don't need that. And I don't know what these are for. Only 2 of them. Usually you get 4. Oh, you know what? I think they came out of this bag. So these are the Intel screws. Okay, that makes more sense. The bag ripped open. Okay, so let's open this thumb screws. We're definitely going to need those, regardless if it's an AMD build or an Intel build. You will use these thumb screws, which have little springs on the ends of them. And then we get our quality inspection tag. And we will need these Intel. Yeah, we're going to need these anyway. And these are the little Intel standoffs. They're going to go from the back plate to what the water block will screw into onto this, and then the thumb screw goes on top of that. So that's how that should work. I will refer to the documentation just to verify, since I've never worked with this brand before. I imagine it's going to be pretty much the same across the board. Now, in our owner's manual or our installation manual here, there's a lot of photos, which I'm a big fan of. And I will bring this up a bit closer so you guys can see. I like that the back of it is empty. So you basically, this is the entire instructions for Intel and AMD, all simplified with easy to see pictures and understanding, a description of all the parts and what they're called over here. That's included in the package, in case you're wondering what something's called. Steps are numbered, the order in which you should do them. I like that. It is not overwhelming. You don't have to flip through several different pages. Finding your language, everything is written in numerous languages in one line with easy installation instructions. I like it. Okay, so the first thing it says here is step 1 to attach the brackets to the bottom of the block. So it's showing the block facing the hoses to my right. And we will use either the AMD bracket onto the pump or the Intel bracket. You'll see they're very different. The AMD bracket typically only has 2 points to affix it, or two holes, where the Intel bracket will have 4 holes to affix it to the CPU. So AMD, Intel. Pretty easy to tell because they're all pretty much the same until you get into the higher end chips. So we will not use this part. And then this part will go in, it'll slide in. See how it's open on one side? That's because of these hoses. So there's a little groove in there, and I don't know that there's an up or a down. I don't think it matters, but it should just slide in, and many water blocks install with a bracket just like this. Now, if these were specifically built for Intel, this would already be pre-attached, but since you can use it on so many different types of CPUs, you have to put the bracket on for your build. And this way you don't have to be so careful over which cooler you're ordering, because you got to make sure it's going to fit your case, but then you got to make sure it's going to work with your CPU. Now, we do have some protective covering here on the bottom of our copper plate down here, and we're going to leave that on until it's time to install it. We want to keep any dust, fingerprints, oils from our skin off of it. Now, at the end of the day, how much difference will that make in your cooling? Probably, you could probably get this dusty and fingerprinted and oils. It's probably not going to make much difference. But if we want to do it, let's do it right. Even if the difference is, you know, teeny tiny, 1 degree to 2 or 3 degrees Celsius at most difference. And if we're running that hot, where 2 or 3 degrees Celsius makes a difference, there's something else going on you need to address. Besides washing your hands and getting an air filter. All right, let's see. So we put that bracket on. Now it's already got us putting the water block in the instructions onto the motherboard. I don't agree with that. I think the radiator needs to go on first. So we're not going to follow these directions. They have us putting the radiator on last. I do not agree in that order. I think that the radiator needs to go on first. Either way, it all gets done. The order in which you do it isn't really that important. But let me see. This is going to go behind the back of the motherboard. I just heard something get knocked off the counter. What did I knock off? Oh, one of my thumb screws. Gonna need that. I am quickly running out of room here. Bear with me for a minute as I kind of visualize how this is going to go in. I anticipate it'll go in with the fans facing downward and the hoses to my right. That's usually the way I like to do it. Bear with me here just a moment. Let me get this at least started, and then I can give you guys a better view of it. Yeah, that's definitely how I need to place it. So there was a bag of screws that said it was for the case and fan screws. Yeah, it's got to be this bag right here. Let's get those dumped out here on the counter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So basically, if we wanted to sandwich 2 more fans onto the other side of it, each fan would take 4 screws. I'm not going to do that because I think it's stupid. However, again, if a 2 or 3 degrees Celsius difference makes a difference in your world, there's something else wrong, in my opinion. So let's get this started here. So we're going to go straight into the back of the radiator with this. Some people like everything to run on the edge. I'm usually an enthusiast. In business, we like everything to run reliably and increase our productivity. If an employee's work is lost during a blue screen, you're essentially paying that employee to do the same work again. Whether or not the CPU runs 200 megahertz faster, so it's at 4,400 and yours is running at 4,600, nobody cares. Like it's not really anything a customer would pursue in the real world. It's something only enthusiasts really measure, typically just with benchmarks with no justifiable reason why they need it. And that's okay, nothing wrong with it. It's just a very different motivation behind why we do what we do and why we pick the parts we pick. Very, very different reasoning behind it. Now, on this build, that's a little unusual for me is the aesthetic value of it. So in business, we don't usually want any aesthetic other than a black box. We don't want any employee to be able to think they've got something nicer, create some office drama and politics over why does this employee get something nicer than me? So we try to make sure that all the cases are the same, even if the internals are different. Because the minute somebody has a perceived better computer, there can be an issue in the office unless you're the boss. And it's just nonsense. It's stupid. This computer would not be used in an office. The one I'm building today is, again, unless it was for the boss. Businesses don't want to spend the money for the RGB and the liquid coolers are ridiculous in maintenance cost. An air cooler will last you for the life of the machine. A liquid cooler will only last you about 4 to 6 years. And it'll require replacement. And businesses will typically keep their desktops about 8 years. I still have the torque wrench set to the torque of 3. We definitely don't want to strip out these screws. They're very easy to strip out on the radiator. And as I suspected, a Jonsbo all-in-one cooler fits into a Jonsbo case like a glove. And then the pump itself has a cable that's going to plug into the motherboard, and then an ARGB cable so you can synchronize all the RGB colors on the fans and the water block together. So for right now, you can see it's a lot easier for me to put that block on once the radiator's installed, which is why I didn't necessarily want to run it outside of the case. Now, when it comes to putting the water block on, we have to use this back plate. And we're going to align the back plate here with the holes on the back of the board. And these screws that you see that were pre-installed, these adjust in and out depending on which Intel socket you're using. They're very, very close, but just a few millimeters in or out. On the socket 1700s, is it out of the box set for socket 1700? I think it is. What's great is these screws you don't have to remove these screws. They slide within their little slot just the way they are. So you can adjust them inward or outward depending on your socket, and it should just fit right in there with no problems, right into the holes, which I think on a socket 1700 are going to be, well, kind of in the middle of the slot, not at one end or the other. Or, could be wrong here. Just as I get it started, lost it. So I think this is a little bit of a challenge, only because they're not locked into any position. We're going to take the short end and we're going to start the short end. And I think just having one of these started will make the other 3 easier to put in, because now you can see that it kind of fell, but it's not falling off. So one is started. Now, if I can get the one in the opposite corner started, then the other should just line right up. So just bear with me for a second here as I take a look at this. And determine what it is I need to do for everything to align properly. There we go. So this is the opposite corner, and I just want to put the standoff into the opposite corner. I don't want to tighten them down. I just want it so that the bracket won't fall off on me. And that way I can adjust the screws on the other two corners in or out until they align with the hole in the board. Which should be much easier. Now that two of them are started, the other two should just go right on in. Oh, I just dropped that right underneath the M.2 drive. What were the odds of that happening? Okay, so because I dropped the standoff, it went down behind the heatsink where the M.2 drive is we put in. And so what I'm gonna have to do is just tilt this. There it goes, just popped out of there. Give me that back. Got it? On your feet. Oh. And then I can get this last one started once I get the mount point aligned with the hole. There it goes. So we never want metal touching metal. So if you're wondering why was there the little plastic washer on the end of the screw, that's so the back of this bracket, which is made of metal, doesn't hit the back of the motherboard, which has power going through it. We don't want any short circuits. Now I'm just going to tighten down these standoffs by hand. They don't have to be ultra super tight, but you don't want them loose. Even when you tighten them down, you're probably going to notice the back plate wobbles a little bit. Once you attach the water pump and tighten it down, it's going to pull. The pump is going to pull this way, and the board is going to pull that way when you tighten it. And that tightens everything up, and that's why those screws, these thumb screws, these we want to make sure they're tight. But these other ones are going to tighten up as we adjust tension onto those thumb screws. And it's going to pull the back plate. The back plate's going to push towards the board the more we tighten the thumb screw in. And the more we tighten the thumb screw in, the more the heat sink is going to push up against the CPU. And that's the tighter that is, within reason, optimizes the heat transfer off of the CPU to the water block. And if it's too loose, or if it's not sitting flush, if it's warped at all or sitting crooked, you're going to have heat problems. And you can't see that with the naked eye. All you can do is take it back off and put it back on again, and try and, when you tighten it up, do opposite corners so that you don't want to go around in a circle, or you'll end up with one side tight and one side loose, or one side making contact and the other side not making contact. So again, you want to make sure that these standoffs, there's no tool for them. You don't need to get your pliers out and tighten them down. Just get them to where you can't turn them anymore with your fingers. They'll come to a dead stop, and it will wobble a little bit, and that's what you want. That is a proper installation. Ron says, I think you may have painted yourself into a corner. That cooler may be in the way of the power supply. Is it? Let's see. No? No, it looks like we have really good cable clearance on this build. With the top of the cooler shown up here, secured, we don't need to have this top panel off anymore. And you'll notice one side of the panel has holes. Those holes are so the radiator can breathe. So you know how this goes back on. We'll just align that, slide it forward, and that locks our lid right back on with the holes towards the front so that everything can breathe. Now, as far as attaching the block goes, we want to lay the case on its back. And we want to do a little bit of a dry fit here just to see Normally I would have the hoses coming out by the ram, and that way the logo that the manufacturer preprints will be right side up. Sometimes you cannot spin the logos, and so if we're going for an aesthetic and we're going for a look, we want to make sure that everything is upright and readable when the case is standing as it should on its own feet. And that looks like a pretty good fit to me. Oh, you know what? The center on this does spin. So we could have these hoses come out any side we want. And then the Jonsbo logo spins 360 degrees. Interesting. So essentially, it'll look like this if it doesn't fall off of there. We still have to put thermal compound on and remove the tape. That's how it's going to look. And then the centerpiece, this little center hub, it says Jonsbo right there, but we could spin that if we wanted Jonsbo to be facing any other direction. Clever. Very clever. All right, so let's take a look at what we got going on here. Into the chat room. Ray Burke said he bought a new Acronis subscription last week. Using your discount, I had a subscription from 2022 for 2 years for 3 computers. And the cost was $39.99, and Acronis adjusted the length to August. Right on. Well, I'm glad you took advantage of that deal. Good luck hooking up the fan cable for the CPU fan now that the all-in-one has been installed. Not quite sure what you guys are seeing that I'm not seeing. There is no blockage from the radiator on this case. So if you look, you'll see the radiator doesn't even come close to the edge of the board. We can get into everything on that board. So I'm confused as to what your anxiety or concern is about. And it may be because you're lacking a close-up and you're making assumptions without asking questions to confirm your false beliefs before coming to a completely incorrect conclusion. Or you're seeing something that I'm misinterpreting and I have no idea what you're talking about. So far as I can tell, this case design is perfect when it comes to cable management. Everything seems to be easily accessible with or without the parts installed. I can't see anything being blocked at any point without the radiators. Doesn't seem to make a difference. It's up and out of the way in its own little section. So I have no idea what you're talking about. Even the cable pass-throughs are below the fans on the radiator. Maybe you're just not seeing it. I don't know. I am baffled. Now, it's entirely possible, we've got these grommets. Maybe you're not seeing them on the camera, but we can take if you're saying the power supply cable won't connect, this big window right here for the power supply cable. And then on the CPU power, which is in the upper left, we have this hard drive tray that's in our way, which looks like it's going to come out from the screws in the back. We can take that out. Interesting. We have, on the back of this, we have 2 screws labeled H. There's a screw right here that says H and a screw right here that says H. Then there's 4 screws that say P. So how much you want to bet the H is telling us these are the screws that take out the hard drive enclosure, and the screws that say P, these are the screws needed to install the power supply. You don't even have to look at the documentation. It's etched right into the back of the case. That's a very thoughtful design. I like it. So if we want to take this hard drive cage out, because we will have to do that to get the CPU power cable in, we just take out the H and the other H. The other screws are not labeled, so I'm just going to leave those alone. And is that all I have to do? I don't know. Let's see. Oh, there is a screw on the inside right here that says HDD. Really dark in there. That's our hard drive cage right there. So the 3 screws, 2 in the front and 1 in the back of the tray, motherboard tray. And those 3 screws, again, they're a little different than everything else. We want to make sure we keep those together with our hard drive tray. But as you can see, we have easy access to running the CPU power cable. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's cutaways, cable routing cutaways there that the radiator does not interfere with whatsoever. So, you know, kudos to Jonsbo, because all these things that have scarred you that you're worried about won't scar you on this build. That's what happens when you just buy cheaper cases. So if you buy yourself a good case, you'll never deal with installing something blocking something else. On the other hand, you might be more into it for an aesthetic. I know that when we did the Segatep, the coffee machine, that one did require certain things going in a certain order. This one does not appear to so far. It appears perfect. I mean, there's plenty of room for cable management back here too. It's crazy. It's deep. So this should be a really easy build, and it should be very attractive. And, you know, easy to build in, easy to upgrade, easy to work on, and yet also maintain that unique aesthetic. It's a rare balance, but it's possible that you can get both. Sometimes we have cases that are easy to work on, but they're not much to look at. And other times we have cases that are beautiful to look at, but they're very difficult to work on. This is a nice balance. I'm impressed. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat here. Ben Laird with a £2 contribution. Right on. Thank you, Ben. Thank you again. Ben joining us from Scotland. All the parts we're using in today's build are listed in the video notes below the video, as always, the way we always do it. What's Up says the product picture on Amazon have the hoses towards the back of the case, and it may be more aesthetically pleasing. You know, I'm glad you said something, because I really wanted this to look like the picture on Amazon. So let's take another look at it, because it's been months since I've seen it. I traditionally run the hoses to the right by the ram. That's just the traditional way. But I'm also not a fan of tradition. I mean, if there's a better way or an alternative way that will work equally as well without sacrificing any convenience or maybe even making it look better, I certainly want to do that. So let me take a quick look over here. We'll jump over to Amazon. And this is I'm just going to search for it. Jonsbo TK-1. Show up. Okay. TK-1. Is the dash that important? Here I thought I would just quickly do a search for it, but it looks like I'm going to have to use my own link. There's the TK2. So the TK2 is just a full ATX version of this, I believe. The TK1 is the smaller micro ATX version. So where did the TK1? I'm just going to use my own link here. That's why they're put here, so that you guys don't have to search for it. There it is. Why it didn't come up in my search. Let's take a look at that together. Let's see, screen sharing. Share these on screen. There we go. Okay. So looking at the photos, the hoses are coming out. It looks like from maybe the bottom of the block, not coming out from the right or the left. Let's look at some other photos here and see what we've got. Now, obviously, they have an air cooler as well, and I just didn't care for the looks of the air cooler. I'm starting to remember looking at these now. Yeah, it does. So they're going to the right, and they're covering up a lot of the ram when they come down to the bottom like this. Wonder why they did that. Then you can see they've got a mechanical drive up here with the power supply down here. Looks like they're using a Corsair 850X power supply in the marketing pictures. There's all your measurements. So if we want it to look, oh, I see what they did. So they've got it reversed. They've got the hoses going along the back and coming out the bottom so it doesn't cover up the ram. Oh, so they took the picture 3 different ways. They took it with an air cooler, a liquid cooler, and then another liquid cooler install here where the hoses went to the right. And you can see how they're covering up the RGB RAM. Now, if you didn't have RGB RAM, I suppose it wouldn't matter. I would not normally run my cable that way. That means reversing the direction of the radiator, which we can do now very easily. And then when we install the block, we put the hoses down. And I do agree, I do think that looks better. Sometimes there's areas that we're blocking. There can often be a fan right here. And then these hoses can interfere with the fan and block the fan from turning, the exhaust fan. But in this case, literally this case, we've got the fans up on top blowing air out the radiator. So having a fan out back would actually be hurting us. It would be taking away air that needs to go through the radiator. Adding more fans is not always a good idea. And this is another great design characteristic that Jonsbo has thought of, where it makes an exception to the rule that moving the hoses to the opposite side is actually preferred in this design. I'm with them on it. And thank you for reminding me to take another look at that, because ultimately that's what I'm trying to replicate here. So let's go back over to camera 1. There I am. And yeah, so we can take this lid back off and we'll reverse the direction of the radiator so the hoses will come out this side here. And then we'll put the water block on with the hoses on the bottom. Oh yeah, that's going to look way better. Yep. Robert wants to know at what point are upgrades not good? People do upgrades for different reasons. Sometimes people just want to keep up, right? They feel like it's important for them to keep up with friends that are perhaps teasing them. Oh, your computer's so old. How old is it? Other times people have some money coming in. Maybe they got a tax refund coming and it's, rather than investing it or putting it into a tax sheltered IRA or investment, they want to spend it. And it feels good sometimes, to spend money. It makes you feel powerful. People like that. There's an emotional adrenaline thing that happens in the brain. And some people are like shopaholics and buy stuff and return things constantly. So some people will do that. Some people have a justifiable need for the upgrade. Some people upgrade because they think it's going to do something it doesn't actually do. I've seen people add RAM to systems where they're not using the RAM they have. And so adding more of what you're not using is just wasting your money, but they think it's going to make the computer better. In many cases, it makes the computer worse. And I've seen people with 128 gigs of RAM having crashes and problems. And all we did is take the 128 gigs of RAM out and replace it with 32 gigs of RAM. The system doesn't crash anymore. Sometimes when you add more RAM, especially on DDR4, there's an instability that starts occurring in Windows where the RAM tests fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just so much RAM. It's using so many Windows resources to manage it. It's affecting other areas of the system. So the system's working harder just because you have the RAM. Even if you're not using it, the system still has to process it and keep track of it. So if you're processing and keeping track of 4 children, it's very different than if there's 40 children. Things can get chaotic and out of control really fast. So RAM can do that to you. So I've seen people spend money they didn't need to spend to get RAM they didn't need, that they're not going to use, that ultimately causes the machine that was once working fine to start crashing. And they can't figure out why, and it's very intermittent. You can't really make it happen. And the solution on the cases where this has been something I've been called to resolve, the resolution was to cut the RAM in half, to just pull the old RAM out and put the old RAM back in, and then everything's fine again. And you ask the customer, do you notice any speed difference? And they go, yeah, it's way faster now. Okay, so by taking out the large amount of RAM and putting in a smaller amount of RAM, you'd expect the customer to say it's slower. That's why I say you can't count on benchmarks. It's like benchmarking food taste. So, you know, what tastes good to you and what tastes good to me, 2 very different things. All right, let me flip this radiator around. Thank you for your questions, by the way. I appreciate the questions here in the chat room. I see Mara's been busy turning a bunch of folks blue again. Right on. Now, let's go ahead and let me take the block off of here because I don't want it to fall off while I'm working. There we go. I'll take out these center screws first. I don't want the radiator to fall or to be held up by one screw. It'll bend. So we'll start by taking out the center screws. Then I'll take out opposite corners. And we'll go to this corner and then the opposite corner. So now, right now, the radiator is being equally held up on both sides by one screw in opposite corners, so we're not tilting backwards or to the right or to the left or forwards. That would put a lot of strain and potentially bend the radiator. Now we're going to support the radiator with our hand. And we'll take out that screw, very gently let the radiator go. Support it again immediately as soon as possible. We don't want too much weight on that one remaining screw. Okay. And then I am going to rotate this 180 degrees. And we'll drop it right back in there. Once again, I just need to have 2 corners started. And I want to be very careful with how I'm supporting this with my other hand. I don't want to put too much pressure on the one screw. It will bend. The whole radiator will bend. But once we have them both started, and normally I wouldn't even tighten them down at this point. However, I feel pretty confident that that's going to be aligned. I could be wrong. Yeah, you know what? I think what I'll do is I'll start the other 2 corners here. And we'll save the middle for the last, because that's the least supportive, or the center ones. I mean, I've seen people install these and don't even use the center one. But I don't see the point. If you've got them, use them. And then how far can we move the radiator this way? It does wiggle a little bit. I have a little bit of motion to the left and right. One potential downside I can see about turning it this way is they do have some cables coming out right here. But, you know, it's really a question of your own personal preference. If you want the hoses coming out this side with the cable facing the back where you're not going to see this cable, in exchange, you're going to see these hoses kind of covering up your RAM. But if you don't want your hoses covering up your RAM, you can get clever with your cable management here and route this cable coming out from this side right along the top here and towards the back, just to get it out of sight. And I think that's probably the best way to go. It looks like that's not going to be too terrible of cable management to do, so we'll leave it that way. Besides, I really want to do it differently. I'm kind of sick and tired of doing the same thing over and over again, so anytime we can mix it up a little bit, count me in. So these are all in here pretty loose. We want to make sure that we can, again, move the radiator forward or backward as needed. But everything looks like it's in a good place. So we'll tighten these back down. Again, it's stopping at a torque level of 3. Perfect. And then if this water block were to go on with the hoses on the bottom, let's just see what that would look like. It does not want to go on this way. The hoses are bending in a way that they don't want to be bent. It's interesting. It's a little better. That's a little better. So essentially the block will go on like this, and then we can rotate that. So where Jonsbo was up there. Oh yeah, I think that looks better. What do you guys think? Zvi thinks it looks much better. Hey, there's Mitch Morrison. Welcome in, Mitch. AC's drafting. I haven't seen AC's drafting in a while. Good to see you again, my friend. Ron. So at this point, what do we have left to do in the build? Essentially, securing the water block. You know, obviously we have to get some thermal compound, remove the protective tape from the bottom of the block, secure it with these thumb screws. 1, 2, 3. Where's my fourth one? There's my fourth one. Then we've got these 2 screws that go, supposed to be 3 screws. Am I knocking all my screws over here? What's going on? I had a 3rd screw here somewhere. There it is. It's over here. It's really important to keep your stuff together. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to move this in these 3 screws. I'm going to put it over here in this pile. And that way I know that before I can get to the thing underneath that, I have to use that in the screws. Then the next piece, which is the top, goes on without screws. And then the next piece is the back that goes on, and we have the screws with that. And that way, everything stays organized in one big stack. As long as I don't knock the stack over, everything's going to be good. There's a contribution of $30.99 Australian from Paul Connolly. And he says, thanks for another great build. Right on. Well, thank you, Paul. Thanks for your contribution, my friend. All right. So once we have the water block on, the next thing we can do is hook up a power supply and, you know, at the very least, plug a power switch in, and we can test fire this. So we're already nearly at 2 hours in the broadcast, so I want to speed this up. We're clearly not going to get the whole thing done today. However, it's a brand new experience I've never built in this case or with this cooler or with this particular chip. Not that the chip should make much difference. Hopefully the RAM I've got is still okay. I know that the NVMe drive is a Gen 3, but it's brand new, so I expect that to work perfect. And yeah, I suppose we could put the water block in permanently at this point. I think we're good to go. I think that's the way it's going to look. Let's take a look here. So for me to do this, it's easier to work with the, whenever you're putting a cooler on, have the motherboard flat. Now, when it comes to the thermal compound, we can use what they sent. I'm a little leery of using thermal compound like this. I'm concerned it's going to be dry, but you know what? Here's the thing. I have other pre-opened thermal compound, and that all thermal compound is basically the same. So unless you're an extremist working with liquid nitrogen, the thermal compound shouldn't make a difference. Whether it's a $50 thing of thermal compound or 50 cent, it all pretty much works the same. There's a placebo effect. It's like a Gucci or a Coach purse isn't necessarily better than a regular purse you buy at a department store. So, you know, as far as like holding stuff and doing the job of a purse, people will pay 30 times more because of the brand. The same thing happens with computers. So I think I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to stick with what I know on this so I don't have to clean it. In a worst case scenario, that stuff's not going to be good. And this perfectly clean CPU that clearly has never had thermal compound will then have to be cleaned. So I'm just going to use some thermal compound I have left over from one of the Scythe coolers. I know it's good thermal compound. And we'll go ahead and we'll just dab some on there. I might have put a bit much on there, but we'll see. Here we go. And I like to use the nitrile glove and spread the thermal compound like I'm oil painting. I don't like using a line or have any area of the CPU exposed because I'm not assured that the thermal compound will spread enough to cover those areas. I'm also concerned if I put too much thermal compound on and it spreads out after being squished down, it oozes out the sides, it makes a big mess. So by doing it this way, I can ensure even coverage across the entire surface of the CPU without having too little or too much. So that's just my preference. At the end of the day, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference how you apply your thermal compound. You don't have to do it the way I do it. And also, I don't have to do it the way you do it. So I like to build everything exactly the same, even if it's an AMD system, an Intel system, a Threadripper, or Xeon. I build it all the same for all my customers, and so I can do the same support is expected without making my life a living nightmare trying to figure out, how I did something differently. For that reason, based on the scale at which I operate, in order to keep my sanity and my profit margin, I do everything the same consistently. And if a customer were to order a computer from me 6 years later, it'll be built exactly the same way as I built it 6 years earlier, so they can expect the quality that likely is what brought them back for another purchase. And then when they've got two computers I need to support, one that's new and one that's 6 years old, as you can imagine, it saves me quite a lot of work. Where I'm helping somebody over the phone and I can't see what they're talking about. If I know I installed them all the same, then I know exactly what to expect. So that makes things much, much more efficient, more profitable, and customers don't wait so long to get things done. Or to wait for me to get things done, I suppose. What I meant to say. I do feel like one of these is not on straight. And we definitely don't want to tighten these all down. I probably really shouldn't be using the electric driver here. These can be a little difficult to start because they have little springs on them. That's going to create that tension I was telling you about earlier when we were putting the motherboard back plate on. That was a bit wiggly, and why that's a good thing. I don't want you to get that far and think you've done something wrong. So I'm going to tighten down one corner here. Then I'm going to tighten the opposite corner. And then we'll do the last two corners. And that way we're doing our best to evenly tighten it so that we're not getting any unintentional warping, which we cannot see. It's happening between the bottom of the water block and the top of the CPU, which is out of our sight. One of the ways you can tell if that's happened is by removing the heatsink and looking under it to see if it's got thermal compound in the shape of the CPU or if any of it's missing. If it's missing, then either it's stuck to the CPU when you took it off or it never touched that part of the CPU. And then when you put it right back on after you've looked at it and you believe you've corrected it, you don't really know because you're right back to where you were, where you can't see it anymore. So you could have just put it right back the way it was, exactly as it was before, if you did everything the same. Now, the power cable for the block is going to go on to a section here called WP, or water pump. And we can worry about routing this cable to make it look prettier later. This is just ARGB. This can go right onto the board's ARGB connector. It's the least of my concerns right now. This cable coming out of the coming out of the radiator, this is also going to need to be plugged into a fan header, and that's going to turn these fans on. And then the ARGB will plug into this ARGB and then into the board. And then we can use the board software to control the sequence and colors. And it'll all sync up together. And when we add these fans here, they're also going to hook up exactly the same into the same ARGB. And that way, however we adjust the lighting, it affects all of it the same. We're not using one software for some fans, another software for the pump, another software for the other fans. One piece of software controlling everything universally. So when it comes to this particular connector, given that it's coming out of that side, coming right out of the front of the radiator instead of the back of the radiator, because we've reversed it from the normal install, we can hide this effectively. I believe we can hide this by, first of all, we want to get all the twists out. And should be able to just run this right out the back here. Lots of room for your cabling. Nothing's being blocked. Very easy to get in here. And if we pull up on the tension on that, it should make it all but invisible, given that it's black and it's going into a dark area. Probably can't see it at all. Of course, I know you wouldn't have been able to see it if we reversed it and it was towards the back to begin with, but if you didn't know it was there, you probably wouldn't know it was there till I told you. And then the fan header, that can go onto any fan header on the motherboard. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it in. I think I'm going to plug it in to the CPU fan. Sure, why not? So the water block goes into the CPU optional, or WP, water pump. The reason we do that is we don't want the water pump to speed up and slow down. We want 12 volts going to it constantly. All we want to do is speed up and slow down the fans blowing air out of the radiator. And then as far as our front port umbilicals go, I don't necessarily need to hook up the front USB right now just to test this to see if it works. So we've got our front USB we've got our front panel that's all one connector like NZXT. You don't have the separate hard drive LED, power LED, reset switch, power switch. All of that's on one connector. Now, the connector normally has 8 wires. This connector only has 4, but it's on the typical full 4 pairs of wire connector. So what that tells us is this is likely a power switch and a power LED, and there is no reset switch or hard drive LED. So case lacks a reset switch and a hard drive LED. Now, I can run that a couple of ways. I can run this cable down through the bottom, or I can run through this grommet that's right here. Let me see, where's our header? The header's right in the corner, so I think running it through the grommet is really the right way to do it. And it's only going to go on one way. One of the cables is plugged, but one of the cable holes in the plug is blocked off. So you can only install this in one direction. And then all we have to do is give it some power, and we should be able to turn this on and see if it works. And we'll update the BIOS, and we can install Windows 11. And everything else is pretty minor, right? Everything else, we'll put 2 fans on the bottom, put the hard drive cage back in once we select a power supply to go into it. Clean up the cable management here in the back, and throw the glass cover on. Assuming that we're not running into any heat issues or there's nothing wrong with that used return CPU I bought, it can all just go right back together. We've done all the hard work. Now for this experiment, I think just my standard 500 watt power supply that I normally use is all we need. Only if you're using a discrete add-on graphics card do you need anything bigger than this. AC's Drafting with a $20 super chat reminds our viewers, if they've lost their blue status, please let Marlena know and she'll correct it. Right on. Appreciate you letting people know. All right. So let's just hook this up outside the case so we can get her done ASAP. So I've got my big motherboard power connector, which I will just temporarily plug on right here. And then, of course, our big, well, not so big, CPU power. And that's going to go on, let's see, right here. Super easy access, nothing's in the way. There it is. Now, I will turn this so you guys can see it, and we'll flip the power supply this way. As for the ARGB, I'm not worried about that right now, so I'm going to leave it disconnected. The only connectors we have left is a USB Type-C 3.1 on the case, our front audio port, and our USB 3. That's it. That hooks up the rest of the umbilicals. So once we give it, let's see, we need to plug it into video. So we'll plug that in right back here. We need a keyboard and a mouse, which I have right behind me, my regular wireless keyboard and mouse. We'll turn those on. They have rechargeable batteries that you recharge through USB. They're not user serviceable. I have to charge them up about once every 4 to 6 months, as infrequently as I use them. And then we need, let's see, what else do I need? Anything else? We don't want the internet. We need a power cable. That's what we need. So let me grab a power cable. And we'll plug that in here. And I think how I'm going to do this, it's everything's in the way. That'll work. Okay, so I'm going to flip the switch on the power supply. Then I'm going to hit the power button here. The power light has lit up. Are our fans turning underneath there? Oh, the RAM just lit up. Let's go over to the right mouse and we'll go to our HDMI input and let's see if this thing is going to boot. So right now it says no signal. Now, whenever we do a first boot, it could take a minute to 3 minutes for it to initialize as it trains the RAM and the CPU and figure out what's there. We're off to a good start as I see the ASRock screen loading. And our NVMe drive is brand new. It has no operating system. And it says our version of BIOS is 3.12. I think 6.05 is the latest. So what I'm going to do, we'll go back here to camera 1 so you see there's no magic being done. I've got the BIOS, latest BIOS already downloaded and extracted onto this blue flash drive, and that's all that's on it. And I will pick literally any USB port to plug that in. Assuming I can see what I'm doing here. There it goes. Now let's go back over to our BIOS. And we will select, oh, see, each one of those sticks is 8 gigs each, 16, 24, 32. Oh, that's fine for this build. Let's go to, let's see, Instant Flash. Please suspend BitLocker. Well, we haven't installed anything, so it automatically finds that file on the flash drive all on its own. Hit the update button and confirm. And it says after pressing enter, the system will automatically reboot. Please wait a few seconds. And then the BIOS update will continue. Once we press that OK button, we're going to have to sit here patiently and wait until it's done. Please do not mess around with your computer in the middle of a BIOS update, or you could cause permanent damage that requires sending it back to the manufacturer. So you'll see the no signal appears on your screen, and that's saying that there's no video signal coming out of our new build. It did warn us that's to be expected, to give it a few seconds. When they say a few seconds, they don't literally mean 3 seconds. They mean upwards of 30 seconds, sometimes even longer. Then it starts the BIOS flash process, and it tells you, don't interrupt this. Right now it's doing the Intel Management Engine, or the Intel ME, and then it's going to do the regular BIOS. So there's 2 different flashes that are firmware software updates in the motherboard that are being updated right now. The BIOS is just software that's programmed onto a chip versus putting it on a hard drive. And so by doing a BIOS update, if we corrupt that, the board will no longer initialize and power on correctly. That's why you've got to take this very seriously. Marvin Jameson is in our chat room. We were just thinking about you, Marvin. Glad to see you're doing well. Good to see you again, my friend. And of course, Marvin is turned blue. As I mentioned, some people were concerned of losing their blue status, but it's just a temporary thing. If you've lost your blue status, just let us know. We'll turn you blue again. Now, with regards to me not worrying about power loss, it's because here at Studio B, I don't think we've ever lost power once in 3 years. Or if it did happen, it happened when I wasn't here. So if you live in an area where you frequently have power outages, or if there's a big storm happening outside, maybe postpone doing this to a nicer day, or use an uninterruptible power supply. But yeah, there's no risk here. We've done this live on camera now so many times. It's never, ever, ever gone south on us. Not once. I can't tell you how many times we've done this, but we have a series of videos going back 16 years here on YouTube. It's never happened. Kurt Schlegel with a $20 super chat says, thanks for the fun and interesting build and Mara's diligent work turning us back to blue. Yes, well, I'm telling you, it's less work to turn you back to blue than it was to turn off blue for over 1,000 viewers who were no longer active with us. And then there would still be mistakes made where also we had some people that had duplicate accounts for some reason. They've lost a password or lost the ability to access YouTube. So they corrected that by creating a new account and then telling us, hey, this is still me, and I have my blue back. And then we had like one person with 3 different accounts in some cases. where 2 accounts were dead, but were still listed as moderators. So this was a nice way to clear it out. Now you'll see we're back to the no signal. That means the system is rebooting again after the Intel Management Engine firmware update. And now it should continue on with the actual BIOS update. So again, it's still not finished. It's going to be hands-off. I believe it's not finished. Let's see if I'm right. Oh, it is finished. So, okay, now we're up here and it says we're at BIOS version 605. So now there's really nothing more I need to do at this point. Motherboard temperature, CPU voltage. CPU temperature is running a nice cool 35 degrees Celsius. We were idling, so nothing wrong with that. Let me go back over to camera 1 temporarily, and I'm going to show you what I'm doing next. I just want you to be able to see full on, because this is live. I don't want to do anything off camera, and then you lose step with how we got there. We're done with this blue flash drive. We'll never need this file ever again. This will be erased, and it'll be put in the drawer for another BIOS update in the future. There's only one file on it. That way I'm not accidentally selecting the wrong file. These are safety precautions, especially when you work on a lot of computers and all the flash drives start looking alike. Very easy to make a mistake. Now, in most cases, it won't even let you flash the wrong BIOS, but I don't even want to waste my time. I want to do it right the first time and get on with other work. Things got to keep moving in my world. So that's one way I keep things moving effectively without having to worry about that simple avoidable mistake. With regards to installing Windows 11, I just need my Windows 11 USB flash drive now, which is one of these over here somewhere. We'll plug that into one of the blue USB ports for speed, because this is a fast and expensive flash drive because it's fast. And then we'll go back to the computer here, and we're just going to leave all the BIOS defaults. In fact, I want to load, just to make sure after a BIOS flash, it's always a good idea to load your BIOS defaults. So under Advanced, and then under Boot, it's not under Boot, maybe it's under Exit. Yeah, load UEFI defaults, yes. Save changes and exit, yes. And without changing anything in the BIOS, the only bootable thing this computer has plugged into it is that USB flash drive. If I had mechanical drives, I would not be installing them yet. I only want my main C drive plugged in at this point. And since my main C drive is brand new out of the box, that means it has no partition, no format, no operating system. The only thing that has a partition of format in the operating system is the flash drive. So by default, when the system turns back on or when it starts to process again, the only thing it has that's bootable, and again, without having to tell it, it says, well, there's no choice here. I don't have to ask you because it's only the flash drive that's bootable. That's the only thing I can boot to. If it can boot to either the C drive or the flash drive, it will automatically default to the C drive first. Just so you know. All right, so now we're just waiting here for a moment. I was expecting it to boot by now, but be patient on a new build. I can't stress that enough. Here it comes. There's our post screen. Remember, we were just resetting the BIOS, and it probably reset some things and had to restart for those settings. And now you see the little toilet bowl flushing, which starts our Windows 11 installation media off of the flash drive. And if you've watched this channel from before, in the past, you know I go through this process exactly the same way for all the reasons I've already stated prior. We're going to put Windows 11 Pro on it, but not with a product key at this time. Accept the license agreement. We always choose a custom install, and there is our Samsung 970 EVO Plus 2 terabyte. And we'll hit next, and it's going to partition, format, and move all the Windows files over for the installation. And this shouldn't take but a couple minutes, and our Windows 11 will be installed. Then we'll have to put on some drivers and Windows updates. So everything's working as it should. System's nice and quiet. Now, let me go back temporarily here. Let's go back over to camera 1. And if you guys have any questions for me, this will be the time to ask. We don't have any of the RGB lit up because I don't have the ARGB cables plugged into the board yet. But rest assured, the little ring on the water block lights up, and then the fans on the bottom of this radiator light up as well, and they'll all synchronize to the board. I'm not worried about that aesthetic. I want to make sure the board works and that we're not having any issues with the CPU or the RAM that I've pulled used. And if everything there checks out, then I'll go ahead and, you know, do the prettying up. But there's no sense making it look pretty if it doesn't work right. So we make sure it works right first, then we make it look pretty last. Ron Toomey says the motherboard is a 12th to 13th gen. How did you know a 14th gen CPU would work? 12th, 13th, and 14th gen CPUs are all pretty much the same in that regard. Any board that uses 12th or 13th or 14th should use either of the others as well. So it's more of a concern when a chip is brand new and you're one of the first people to have it, and perhaps you're upgrading an older board. In that case, make sure you have the latest BIOS before you begin. Because of the inventory being so lean since the pandemic, most of what you're buying is going to be new inventory. And since the 14th gen has been out for some time now, everything should already be updated to acknowledge it. If not, if, for example, we would have plugged in the 14th gen and got no video or post, I would have grabbed a 12th or 13th gen CPU temporarily, dropped it in there, just so I can update the BIOS, and then I would take it out and put the 14th back in. As a computer shop, I have these parts laying around. So it's nothing I even gave a second thought to. How much RAM is in this build? Robbie in the chat wants to know. There's going to be 4 sticks that are 8 gigs apiece for a total of 32. And the solid state drive is a 2 terabyte Gen 3 Samsung 970 Evo Plus. Oh, I just saw Dwayne Blackwelder in there saying good night. Good to see you, Dwayne. Hi and bye, I suppose. I just saw you in there. Any other questions I can answer for you guys while we're waiting? Let's see how we're doing on our install. Looks like we're already rebooting. Now, assuming everything's fine and I hook the RGB back up, I will go to VIP CDK deals and I will buy a Windows 10 Pro product key. And then when I want to activate Windows 11, I will type my Windows 10 Pro product key into the activation section of Windows 11, and it will activate as though it were a Windows 11 Pro product key. But the Windows 10 Pro product key sells for less money. It does the exact same thing, but for less money. If you want to buy a Windows 11 product key, don't let me get in your way. It's more money for the sponsor. On the other hand, if you would, like to save some money to get the exact same thing that works exactly the same way, do know that Windows 10 Home product keys work to activate Windows 11 Home, and Windows 10 Pro product keys work to activate Windows 11 Pro. You do not need to install Windows 10 first. You don't even have to have Windows 10. All you need is the product key. It treats it the same as a Windows 11 product key, but the Windows 10 product key costs less. Just a little tip from your Uncle Carey to save you some bucks. Now let's see how we're doing on our install. Go back, take a look. Oh, good, it's waiting on us. So you'll see me always do this the same way. Once again, every customer gets everything done the same. So if they call me for support in 2 weeks or in 7 years, I know exactly how it's set up, unless the customer changed it, in which case all bets are off. I like to keep my location settings on. I find it's very convenient for keeping the date and time up to date, as well as anytime I want to Google search for a particular, oftentimes a restaurant near me, or whatever I'm looking for, car parts, or a dealership, or a mechanic, or a doctor's office. I can type in what I'm looking for with the words near me. And with the location settings on, I don't have to specify where I am. It can kind of guesstimate that based on your IP address. Whereas your phone can tell you precisely, it'll tell the search engine within 5 feet of where you are. Not necessarily a bad thing to have location settings turned on. It could save your life one day if you ever go missing or get lost. In fact, I've had somebody who was in a crisis call and asked if I could pick them up. And I said, "Where are you?" And they said, "I don't know. I went over to a friend's house and the friend got drunk and started being abusive, and I don't want to be here anymore. But I wasn't paying attention since they picked me up and brought me here. I'm not exactly sure where I am." It's like, well, just, you obviously have a phone because you're calling me. Go to Google and say, "Where am I?" And your exact location should come up, and then send that to me in a text or tell me, and I'll come pick you up. So these services a lot of people want to turn off for privacy end up actually causing their own harm. It's something to consider before you make that decision. Now, with Windows 11 already loaded, we can look and see how many items are missing out of the device manager. We can just right click and go to the device manager here. And I'm sure we're going to have some items. Yeah, we've got some PCI devices here, SM bus controller, and we can grab all of that from the motherboard manufacturer. But first, I mean, we could do Windows Update. If I unplug my Windows 11 flash drive and then grab my Ethernet cable, now we can plug it into the internet. And we should see this bottom right globe down here in the bottom right corner become like a little computer screen. If our network card driver loaded, which it appears to have done. Do you want the one step to install the drivers? Yes, I do. This is coming directly from ASRock. And now we don't have to grab the drivers manually or worry if Windows Update has them. We can get them direct from the manufacturer, which is always preferred if it's easy, if it's convenient. And what this will do is it'll analyze our device manager to see what's missing, and then offer us updated drivers for anything that is recommended. So you'll notice we don't have any third-party bloatware or anything. There's no Norton here. We've got the LAN driver, the management engine driver, the HD audio, the VGA driver, which is built into our chip, and our INF driver from Intel, our chipset driver. That's it. So just hit update. It's frustrating when other manufacturers will include Norton or other unnecessary bloatware. So do watch for that before you immediately hit the update button. Looks like you're pretty safe with ASRock, though. So kudos to ASRock for not participating in that nonsense. And let me just look again here in the chat, and then that'll probably wrap it up for today. We're half an hour over, but considering everything we got done, it's not too bad. Not too bad at all. Paul wants to know what version of Windows 11 I'm installing. I go to Microsoft and I download Windows 11 using the Windows 11 media creation tool for Microsoft. And I download the ISO image. I don't let Microsoft create the USB. You have a couple options, make the USB or download the ISO. So I download the ISO. Then I use a free tiny little program called Rufus. And I say, I want to make this ISO a bootable flash drive. And it says, do you want, I noticed that this is a Windows 11 install. Do you want to disable these features of Windows 11 that require a Microsoft account, et cetera, et cetera? And check the box, yes, I do. And then you hit the button and it makes your USB flash drive with those particular features that it's offering you to enable or disable already by default on the installer. That's how I do it. I think you can even Google that, and there's some walkthroughs here on YouTube of people showing you the entire process. 3D Everything with a $10 super chat says, thank you, Carey and Mara. Well, thank you, 3D Everything. Thank you for supporting the channel. Gary wants to know if the CPU power limits are set right on this board. I'm going to guess they're not. However, you're so far ahead of where I am. It's like you're asking what my 0 to 60 time is, and I haven't even put gas in the car yet. So that'll have to be something we address in a future video, or I'll be on 2 more hours today. So I think we'll likely, go ahead and wrap this one up here in the next few minutes, and we'll do another video where we sort of button it up. And before we button it up, we'll make sure that its temperature is running within spec. Now, with a liquid cooler on there, we can get away with running higher temps more successfully. I don't know what this cooler is effective at with regards to keeping the chip cool, nor am I familiar with how hot a 14600K can get, because I've never used one before. But it's definitely something I'll be looking into, and we will run Cinebench on it. And we'll see how, if it peaks and hits 100 degrees Celsius with a liquid cooler, then we have a problem, and we'll go into the BIOS. We already know how to address that. That's pretty straightforward on an ASRock board. Other questions? Shamim is asking about that Windows update. I suggest you follow my video on this, which I don't use the mini tool partition software. I don't use any of that. You can also choose to hide the update. That fixes it too. Trevor wants to know if there will be a part 2. Yes, I intend to do a part 2 on this. Oh, Mara wants me to check my email. I haven't looked at my phone this whole day, so probably should do that. Mustang Mike with a $10 super chat says, this is Mike Pedekowitz. Thank you for saving me 30% on a Cronus. Have a great weekend. Well, thank you, Mustang Mike, for sharing your savings with us and helping support the show. Rob Foster sent a very generous Amazon gift card. Rob Foster, are you in the chat room? Is there a Rob Foster in the house? I have a delay between when I talk and when you hear me, so we have a very generous Amazon gift card from somebody named Rob Foster. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very generous indeed. Let's see how we're doing over here on our... Oh, did this go to sleep on me already? It did. You know what? I'm going to make a change to that power setting because that drives me crazy. So let's go over here and we'll just type in the word edit. And then edit power plan comes up, which is what I want. We're going to turn off the display after 3 hours. And then it won't do that anymore. All right, so that'll continue doing what it's doing. And when it's done, all of those items in the device manager that didn't have drivers, that'll all be gone and the device manager will be pristine. Then we'll go to Windows Update. We'll do all the Windows updates. And then likely I'll set this aside just as it is, and we'll pick it up with a part 2 where the power supply will go in. We can look at the Cinebench results. I'll save all that. I have plenty of other things to do in the meantime, so we'll just get this off the bench and move it aside. I suppose I could put the cover back on there, except My hard drive cage screws are on top of it, so I definitely want to keep all that together so I can put the drive cage back in when I'm done. I'll just put that right back on there. Oh, this is a nice build. I just love how everything's very easily accessible. Cable management's going to be simple. Nothing interferes with anything else except that little hard drive tray, which is really super easy to remove. I suppose my only complaint would be the fact I have no reset switch or hard drive LED. That's about the only thing I can complain about. I must be losing my touch if I can't find more to complain about. And then overall, we'll see how the cooler works. Because again, Jonsbo cooler, I don't know who actually makes it for them. And I don't know how effective it'll be on a 14600K. But we'll find out on the next part of this video. Jeff wants to know what I think of the 14600K. I don't know yet. I mean, this is my very first time using one, and I haven't done anything with it yet. We're just still trying to get the operating system installed. So I suppose that thought will come in part 2 as well. Ben Laird, it says, is Norton still in business? Yeah, well, Norton's a massive, massive company, and it's run primarily by large corporations with 10,000 or more employees, and they do quite well financially. And the home consumer space, the consumer market's never really been one to pursue if you wanted a company to get big. Consumers don't have enough money, they don't buy often enough, they're more likely to steal, they're more likely to keep something long after it should have been thrown away. And the money, if you want to make money in the computer industry, you want to focus on businesses, even small businesses, doctors, lawyers, and dentists, or very large corporations, from your power company and utilities providers to your internet, to your cable companies and all your manufacturing companies. Whenever you go downtown and you see those high-rise buildings in whatever downtown area that you live beside or close to or closest to, hundreds of millions of dollars pour in every year to pay for all of that. And hundreds of thousands of employees will drive downtown every day to go to work. That's where the money is. With consumers, it's just too spread out. You get a couple here, a couple there, and then every couple of years they might buy something or they might not. So, when it comes to software and stuff like that, consumers are extraordinarily limited in their purchasability and frequency. So if you want to be in business and stay in business, you got to focus on business, not on the consumer. So that's no way to measure the success of anything. Not seeing Norton on consumer computers doesn't indicate there's anything wrong with Norton. I think Norton's bigger now than it's ever been in the entire history of the company. But no thanks to consumers. But I don't use it because I'm not a big business. In a big business where you don't want to sit at every desktop to update your antivirus or to check on it, you need a central point of control to see thousands of desktops at a given moment, or to be alerted to anything suspicious activity happening on any desktop at any location of the company at any time. And so Norton does that, or there's a version of it that does that, as are, other products as well. But yeah, the consumer space is by no means any way to measure anything. Hertz Rental Car will buy more cars than probably the entire city you live in 1 year. Just that one company. So obviously, car manufacturers want to sell to fleets versus selling to somebody who buys a car once every 8 years or whatever. Paul wants to know what brand this case. This is the NISO case. Was that Segatep that made the NISO, NESOP1? If you search YouTube for the NESOP1, you'll find this build video. I think that was Segatep, if I'm not mistaken. Not quite sure why some people aren't seeing my content. It's very baffling to me that we probably did 3 or 4 videos on this case. For somebody to say I've never seen it before, but they're a regular viewer I see in the chat room from before we did this and now to today, and somehow the entire series of this whole computer went under the radar for them. This is a problem I'm trying to solve with YouTube and their algorithm. It's really frustrating to me as a content creator that I can take content that I posted previously and repost it and almost double the number of views from people who think it's brand new and never saw it the first time around. I'm not quite sure why that's happening. It could be the device that people are watching on, if it's a phone or a television, or it could be that they don't properly use YouTube, they don't know how to use it, or they're trusting a certain sequence of events for YouTube to recommend it, that they're not intentionally going and looking for it or subscribing. If you subscribe to the channel and turn your notifications on, you'll be made aware anytime I post new content, whether it's a repost or it's live, or it's new content I've uploaded not live, or if I've done a community post or a short video. So there's 5 different ways I can post that you may not be aware of at all if you haven't turned that on. And then, of course, if you like the content, be sure and hit the thumbs up button. So YouTube will, the algorithm will recommend more content like that. A lot of people think, and a lot of creators think, if you like the video, give me a thumbs up. But when they say it's helping them, it's really helping you. When you give something a thumbs up or a thumbs down in Spotify or Pandora or Netflix, it's gauging what, based on what you're telling it you like and what you don't like, it's using that information to provide suggestions to you that will be more useful. For the content creator, if that means that it will suggest more videos from that content creator, then it helps the content creator as a secondary effect. But the whole purpose of a thumbs up and a thumbs down is so that the YouTube algorithm can recommend content for you that you're more likely going to be interested in. If you never give anything a thumbs up or a thumbs down, it's just a dumb guess. It's just literally throwing anything at you, and it doesn't record or keep track of, well, you do have a YouTube history, and based on the history, it may recommend more of that, even though you haven't told it whether or not you like it. Unfortunately, YouTube can't figure out if somebody's watching a video for a certain length of time. They must like it. It should just default to automatically assuming you want to see more like that, given how much time you spent. But it doesn't work that way. So if you go ahead and make sure you thumbs up any content, whether it's from Netflix or Spotify or YouTube, anytime you're asked, do you like this, yes or no, thumbs up or thumbs down? The idea is to create an echo chamber so you don't have to look at things you don't want to look at. You don't have to hear things you don't want to hear. You get to live in your own little bubble where the only thing that exists are the things that you like, and you don't have to be bothered by the things you don't. That's good and it's bad. In the one way, it generates more revenue for the service because you're more likely to click on things. And the more you click on things, the more they get paid. The longer they can keep your attention, the more they get paid. On the other hand, it may only present you with one perspective and one point of view, totally locking you out of any opposing dialogue, which you may not want to hear anyway. I would hope that we're all open-minded individuals, but let's face it, some of us only believe what we believe and everybody else is wrong. And all that stuff is just annoying to hear opposing opinions. But that's what the internet does. It creates an echo chamber. And you get to hear and see only what you want to hear and see, and be damned with any reality or what anything else doesn't matter to you as an individual. The world could be blowing up outside, but it's telling you everything's fine because that's what you want to hear. And as long as you don't go outside, you won't know any better. So is it harmful? Is it good? It's all about making money. It's about keeping you stuck to the screen as long as possible. They don't want you leaving and going somewhere else, even though you will eventually. But that's part of the instant gratification and addiction that comes with using our smartphones and being online. And people stay up all night and just can't stop. It's It's a real problem for some people, for most people. I couldn't imagine being a teenager with this sort of level of instant gratification available at my fingertips 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without a day off. That's exhausting after a while. Oh, Mara says it's a Gamdius case, not a Segatep. The Gamdius, is that what it is, Mara? NISO P1? Some of these case manufacturers, Usatex, Gamdius, and Segatep, and even Jonsbo, I start to confuse them because I haven't used enough of their product. And they all make unusual product. And that's the reason why I buy it, is they're breaking the mold on what is the standard ordinary thing you see from Corsair and NZXT Cooler Master. The stuff is very different. And all four of those companies fall in that category: Musatex, Jonsbo, Segatep, Gambius. So if you're looking for something different, look at those four manufacturers. Search for them on Amazon or Newegg and see some of the variety that they have. Azza, A-Z-Z-A, is another one that makes really outrageous cases, but I can't recommend them. They're a bit difficult to work on. They're all about how they look. That's their main thing. Everything else is secondary. Is my streamer computer still the Threadripper? At Studio A, yes. Did I ever build an Asus Evangelion PC case? No, just the cooler. Just the cooler. By the time I got to it, all that stuff was sold out. The motherboard, the video card, the case. And you know what? I'm not a fan of it. So I just really wanted the red cooler. And that was the only one I could find. The fact that it's Evangelion, I didn't even know what it was. I know it's anime, but it's nothing I'm interested in. Let me take a quick look just real fast here on how we're progressing along on our driver updates here. I hear the fans cranking up. So it's clearly getting warm. I don't know how warm. It says our updates are done. It wants a reboot down here from a Windows update. Let's go ahead and restart. Fans are starting to quiet down already. So maybe one of those updates was causing something to drive pretty hard in the background. And I don't know what our temps are. I mean, I can quickly jump in the BIOS, but whatever they were a minute ago or a few seconds ago, the temps drop pretty rapidly. And you can hear it in the fans. I can tell if it's running hot just by how it sounds. And they're not extraordinarily loud, but I wasn't even noticing them before. So the fact that I was starting to notice them indicates to me that they were running pretty loud, trying to catch up with whatever heat they're dissipating. And then I could probably put my hand over the top and feel the air coming out here. Yeah, the fans have almost silenced completely now. So, all right, I think that is going to do it for us. We'll follow up the build and we'll look at the temps. It's nothing we need to worry about today, not yet. I'll continue to do the updates off camera just to get that slowness out of the way, and we can pick up from there. My thanks to everybody for your contributions, to all my members for supporting the channel, to all the moderators. I appreciate your patience as we're putting moderators back. All the moderators got wiped out. We're starting from scratch again. And so if you find that you've lost your moderator status, just leave a comment in the video. Put that back for you. We just had a lot of, I'd say about half or more of the moderators we had set, we haven't seen them in over a year. So the only way to really clear that out effectively is to start over, start with a clean slate. Mark Gaines with a 20-pound contribution. He says this is an appreciation of Mara's work behind the scenes. Very kind of you, Mark, and thank you for joining us there from Northern Ireland and continuing to support us. That massive contribution from, was it Rob Foster? Was that the person's name? I got to give another shout out for that generosity. Yeah, Rob Foster. Thank you so, so much. And also to, of course, Peter Laycock, who we call Buster, our friend Oystein in Norway, Frankie B in New York. These guys are putting the majority of the bill to make these videos. And so if you see them in the chat, please let them know that you appreciate their contribution and their generosity, because without them, most of this content wouldn't be possible, as we've purchased everything you see here has all been purchased. Nothing was sent to us for free by any manufacturer, and therefore we're free to talk about it however we want to talk about it with no repercussions. So without your generosity and support, this wouldn't be happening. Of course, thanks to Mara for all the work she's doing behind the scenes. She will create a thumbnail for this. I asked her to wait until we were done because I wasn't quite sure which parts I was going to use. I'm still not sure which power supply I will end up using. I'll make up my mind and we'll figure it out in part 2. And thanks to everybody who has contributed today in Super Chat. Thank you all. There's Ryan in Canada with a $2 contribution, said my mod status disappeared, then came back. Yep, that's how we're doing it. That'll wrap it up today. Thank you again for hanging out and joining me today. And I hope that we'll see you back here for part 2. Just watch your subscription status for when that gets updated for part 2. I'm not sure when it's going to be done. It's as time permits, without a customer waiting on this. It's at my leisure to work on it. And it depends on what I've got going on, what customers I've got to help, or what appointments I've got scheduled, where I have a day where I can film, and I will pick this up with a part 2 on another live video just like today. That'll wrap it up for me, and I thank you again for all of your contribution and support. And again, from Old Man Mage with a very generous Amazon gift card, as well as I see a couple Amazon gift cards here I've missed. Nick Poverman and NetFreak, Gregory McGlynn, Anthony Franceschi, Anthony, thank you for your generous support. Tom Jackson, thank you for your Amazon gift card yesterday. Old Mad Mage, not Old Man Mage, Old Mad Mage. Whoever that is, I don't know who you are, but thank you for the very generous Amazon gift card. That was also yesterday. And yeah, we're using all that money in Amazon gift cards to go and buy stuff from Amazon, which is where the majority of this came from, minus the cooler. The cooler I could only get from eBay, but right from South Korea, which was thought was really cool. And we'll see if the cooler's any good or not in part 2. So far, we're starting off on a good first step here. And I'm looking forward to testing it. I will be sadly disappointed if it doesn't work well, because everything else seems like it's working well. And I fully expect to get more of the same from other products from Jonsbo, including these additional fans we have yet to put on as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all again very, very soon. And until next time, bye for now.